There are some things in life you can never truly prepare for, not least of which meeting your first polar bear. We hoped we would encounter them when we left Longyearbyen. It was a long way from a certainty. Not only did we meet a polar bear though, we actually encountered three. A female nursing her two almost fully grown cubs. They were utterly unconcerned by our presence, which is a good thing, certainly, but their nonchalance was perhaps a little overplayed. As we watched, the glacier carved behind them, and they paid that no more attention than they did us, at least at first. Shortly afterwards, they all got up, the adult and one of the juveniles, then laid back down. The other cub, though, was clearly feeling a little more adventurous and set off across the rocks. Not much for rocks, certainly, but certainly farther than I'd intend to jump with sub-zero water surrounding them. Eventually, though, that was too much even for the more adventurous cub, and it also went to sleep. We'd heard before visiting Svalbard that the native reindeer to the island were somewhat stockier than their mainland counterparts. Nothing really could have prepared me for exactly how barrel-shaped they truly are. Despite this, or perhaps because of this, they seem to be extraordinarily well adapted to their environment. Mainland reindeer can survive on a huge variety of different greenery, including moss and lichens, and the Svalbard reindeer really are no different. They just have a lot more restrictions on some of the things they can eat. For example, there are no trees, there is no bark for the reindeer to nibble on, so almost all of their forage is either the incredibly coarse, tough grass or lichen from rocks. As with many other species, such a nutrient-poor diet means they spend a truly vast amount of time eating, and when they're not eating, they are digesting their poor-quality forage. You can tell when a reindeer is digesting its food because it's lying down and normally making some very odd noises if you can get close enough to hear its stomach. And in the interests of contrast, these are some mainland reindeer, and you can clearly see they have a much less stocky appearance and their legs are significantly longer. That aside, they are just as belligerent as their island counterparts with one another. Considering that moose are the largest member of the deer family, well over 2 meters tall at the shoulder, I hadn't expected them to be as difficult to find. Despite their size, their camouflage is absolutely exceptional. Their brown fur blends in perfectly with the edges of the forest where they spend most of their time foraging, both for wild vegetation and for farmers' crops. Ostensibly, moose are diurnal, which means they should be visible during the day, but they tend to only come out of the deep forest during the hours surrounding dawn and dusk, which makes them surprisingly difficult to locate. A juvenile moose, by contrast, has remarkably bright reddish-brown fur, and therefore sticks out very much like a sore thumb in a farmer's field full of crops. Whilst we were privileged to see a number of different individuals during our time in Norway, unfortunately we didn't see any of them for very long. Every individual we saw was nervous around humans, and as soon as it spotted us, left at great speed. Some few individuals did spend some more time near the edges of the woodland where they felt safe and could immediately escape from us if we headed towards them. Despite this, they are quite beautiful animals and really quite graceful as they move through the short grass or crops as they forage for food. I hope one day to see a moose in the forest in its truly natural habitat, but they are majestic even so. Last but not least from our visit to the Svalbard and Jan Mayen archipelago, the largest animal that spends any time on land, albeit briefly and very, very close to the shore, the walrus. And it has to be said, up close and personal, they are absolutely terrifying. The sheer amount of force they're able to leverage in order to move themselves around with apparent ease really is awe-inspiring. The group shown here were one of the last to leave the archipelago, and they seemed utterly unconcerned by our presence. Perhaps that is due to the fact that if they'd felt so inclined, they could have absolutely smeared us against the gravel of the beach we were standing on. It took us nearly half an hour to get close enough to them to get this footage, but it was well worth it, despite the profound stench of rotten shellfish, which we're told is pretty much par for the course for getting this close to a walrus. Whilst the walrus were absolutely fine with our presence, it has to be said they were less than convinced by one another. Every now and again, whilst we were watching, there would periodically be an amount of posturing, and on 2 occasions we actually saw blood drawn. Not very much, but those tusks, whilst appearing little more than ornamental, are quite vicious when, as we've established, the force of a 2-ton male walrus is leveraged behind them.